Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. We're going to be talking about tips that I wish someone would have taught me on my labor and delivery orientation. As a new labor and delivery nurse, you have so many things to worry about all the time. You're probably anxious and mostly just anxious. I've been a labor nurse for about 9 months, and I want to talk to you guys about what things have really made a difference for me that I kind of had to learn on my own. Let me know in the comments if there's something that you've been taught by your preceptor or that you've just learned on the job that has really helped you. I would love to be able to add to this video in the future or make an update video down the road. Okay, so the first thing is if you have a patient who's super nauseous, sometimes women get really nauseous as they make cervical change. One of my key things when I think someone might be complete and ready to push is usually they get really sweaty, really nauseous, they might get sick. That usually clues me in that they might be complete. But I've also had patients that get sick every time their cervix changes. Now, giving Zofran is really effective for some people, but for some people, I swear it makes no difference. I can give them all the Zofran I can, and they're still just getting sick over and over again. Something that has worked really well for me that I learned from an Instagram page for midwives is giving patients alcohol pads to smell. I usually just rip a few of them open and let them smell them, and for some reason that can help with nausea. I usually try to use that while I grab the Zofran or if the Zofran hasn't worked. That kind of leads into my second tip. When I first walk into my patient's room for the day, I always give them an emesis bag. We have these little blue bags that I can put through the bed rails, and every time, I swear every time that I have forgotten to give this to a patient, they end up getting sick. There's nothing worse than a labor patient who is already in pain and contracting and also getting sick, and they don't have anywhere to get sick. I always give them that blue bag and put it through their bed rail right when I walk in, and that way if they get sick, they can just grab it and get sick and it's no big deal. I tell them when I give it to them, I don't anticipate you're going to get nauseous, but just in case, I'm going to put this right here. You would be surprised how quickly some women go from being completely fine talking to you to, I think I'm going to throw up. So having that there is great. Even on postpartum, I sometimes do this. It depends on how far out they are. Usually when someone checks in for their induction, I'll make sure there's one there until they are 24 hours postpartum, because I've even had when I get them to the postpartum room and they're getting up for the first time or they're eating for the first time after labor and then they get sick. To prevent having to clean up a huge mess and change a bunch of sheets, have that bag next to your patient at all times. Another really great tip that I figured out early in my labor orientation is closed knee pushing. I had a patient that I can remember specifically that had been pushing for about an hour and a half when I got there. I mean, she had great effort, but it just wasn't happening. I had just seen on the Bundle Birth Nurses page that morning about closed knee pushing for small pelvic outlets. So I put on some sterile gloves and I felt her pelvic outlet while she was pushing, and it felt very tight. I had her husband and I think her mom bring her knees close together, kind of knees touching, and then had her crunch forward onto that while she pushed, and I could instantly feel more room. So I had her push like that for 20 minutes with every contraction, with her legs pushed together, her knees together, and pushing for 10 seconds 3 times. And within 20 minutes, she was +2, and I was calling the residents and staff to come for delivery. A joke we have on our unit is never trust a multip. So a multip is a multiparous woman, someone who's had multiple vaginal deliveries before. Never trust them when they're in labor because they will blow a baby out on you with no warning. One of my first days on my own after labor orientation, I came onto the unit and took report on a patient who had been 1 centimeter 2 hours before. She had just came in, was having some contractions, and she was only 1 centimeter. This was her 4th baby. During report, started to cry out more and was saying, I think I need my epidural, because she had had an epidural with all of her other babies. I said, no problem. And so another nurse started calling anesthesia, and we started getting things ready, and she was sort of crying and moaning, but doing a pretty good job. Very quickly, this turned into more frantic moaning and louder. One of the residents happened to be walking in the halls and popped her head in and said, do you mind if I just check her? Because I work at a teaching hospital, so the residents check the patients, not the nurses. We can check a patient, but we're supposed to let the residents do it. That probably would have been my next move, but she just happened to hear her right around the time it started. Doctor came in and checked her. And when you know, she was complete and +2. A contraction or 2 later, she was crowning. So that was one of those, you're calling charge nurse, you're calling everybody into the room because your table's not set up, because this patient had only been 1 centimeter 2 hours before. All in all, it was fine. It was a great delivery, but Never trust a multip. She delivered about 13 minutes after I took report. My next tip is I like to ward off evil spirits by grabbing a bag of LR and a bag of Pitocin as soon as I come into the room for my shift. There's nothing quite like a precipitous delivery when there's no Pitocin in the room. I usually like to grab a bag of Pitocin and a bag of LR and have it sitting on a cart in the room, usually primed, but it kind of depends on like the patient's status. It always feels like the baby will start to decel as soon as you don't have a fresh bag of LR in the room and you can't give that bolus that you need to. Another tip I have for you guys is if there's ever a big decel going on and it's not your patient, you obviously are going to want to like go in and help if you can. Something that's really good is to have an idea of what you're going to offer to do before you go in. Sometimes you run in and you want to help, but there's already another nurse in there helping her turn. There's someone calling the doctor. There's someone putting oxygen on her, and there's someone starting a bolus. And really, it almost feels like there's not anything for you to do, and you don't want to just stand around staring, but you don't want to be useless when there's kind of a light emergency going on. Something I started doing on orientation was offering to grab the terbutaline. It's usually something people think of, but I swear sometimes when there's a baby that's down and you're trying everything really quickly, having someone that can offer to run to the med room and grab the terbutaline can be amazing. I usually run in and say, does anyone have terbutaline? And if they say no, which often if you get there early enough, no one has left to go get that yet, I will run and grab a vial of it and get it all ready to be drawn up. It's better to have it in the room and not need it than to not have it and have the doctor come in and ask for it. Terbutaline stops contractions. So if a mom is contracting too much and the baby's not having time to oxygenate between, heart rate can go down and they can have a big decel. Giving that terbutaline can be like an instant relief for that baby because the uterus will relax and the baby's heart rate can come back up. I've seen it happen many times and terbutaline saved the day. So now that's my go-to thing to offer. My next tip is at the beginning of your shift. At my hospital, we have like our patient, and then we usually, if there's rooms available, have a ready room assigned to us in case we're next up. I go into my ready room and I make sure to walk through and have everything stocked exactly how I would need it in case of emergency. So some things I like to think about were, what if I got called and said that we have a bypass coming to my ready room? What things am I going to want to have in the room? I'm going to want to have a bed that's ready, of course. I'm going to want to have a warmer that's stocked. I'm going to want to have a delivery table that's not necessarily open because they're only good for 24 hours, but at least with all of the necessary things on it so that someone can quickly open it up. I'm going to want to have anything for like baby resuscitation, like a Neopuff and all of that the NICU might need if I call them for this delivery. So many things like that. So I go through every like emergency in my head and I make sure we have everything. So okay, if I have everything for an imminent bypass delivery, cool. Then I would go on to what if I have a NICU delivery? I know what things they might need. We have like a little resuscitation box in the room and I make sure that that's in there. I think about what if we have an imminent delivery and then they need a vacuum at the last second. So I always check, make sure that there's 2 vacuums in the room, like the little Kiwi suction vacuums. I try to make sure that there's linens, which is pretty easy, but sometimes someone's water breaks and you go to grab them a towel and you don't have any and you're like, oh, wait 1 second. You have to run down the hallway and get towels. Not worth it. So I make sure there's towels in the room. I make sure that I at least have a few sutures for if there's an imminent delivery and there's a bad tear, because I don't want them to have to wait while I run all the way down the hallway to go get sutures. I'd rather just have some in the room that they commonly use. If I'm next up, I'll even turn my warmer on standby so that it's like lightly warm so that I don't have to worry about a bypass that could potentially have a baby born and then the warmer is completely cold. That wouldn't be cool. I also make sure that I have all my necessary mom resuscitation things. Like if we have a pre-E patient that becomes eclamptic, I want to make sure I have bedside suction with a Yankar. I want to make sure I have a bag and mask for mom and baby, just because it's good to have those in the room. I make sure that I have oxygen, like the non-rebreather mask, just all the things like that that you would need in case of an emergency. My preceptor on labor also taught me to always do a bed check. So if you have time in your empty room, unlock your bed and make sure it moves freely, because sometimes when you lift the beds up and then you lower them down, they can get like wedged against the wall with like the rubber bumper, and then they're really hard to move when you have a stat C-section or a cord prolapse and you're like trying to get out of there really quick and your bed won't move. So I like to move the bed, make sure it's free moving. And even if there's already a patient in the room, I like to do that. And I like to come in and think, if I needed to run to the OR right now, what would I need to get out of the way and what cords would I need to detangle and get out of the way before we could do that? So I look at their like IV lines and I look at their fetal monitoring cords and everything. I look at everything that's plugged in behind the bed and I try to make sure it's all very concise so that if I needed to pull it and go, we can go. I put a little red cap on top of the epidural machine in case I need to cap her epidural and get out of there, because the epidural pump is like hooked to the the wall, and it's got a tube going into her back. So if I need to disconnect that tube, put a little red cap on it and roll, I can do that. Those are all things you don't want to be searching around for in an emergency. If you have all the necessary supplies in the room during an emergency, you can just call for help and not call for supplies. And I think that's really important. I like to have tools on my badge to teach moms about dilation. Like I showed in my last video, you can, oh my goodness. Like I showed in my last video, I have a dilation bead that clips onto my badge and it shows every bead is a centimeter. So if a mom is 5 centimeters, I can show her you're halfway there. You need to get to here before you can push. I think that comes in handy a lot. And my little lactation belly beads come in handy, I feel like even more often, because almost all of our moms in my hospital breastfeed and we have to show them that the baby's belly is really tiny and what you have is all that baby needs right now. My last tip I want to give you is utilize a peanut ball if you can on your unit. That thing is probably the best invention ever for labor and delivery. I've gotten to work and had a pogie, which is like a first-time mom that's never delivered before. It's kind of like a play on words with a G1P0. We just flip it around. So we call them pogies. And if I have a pogie that's been like 2 or 3 centimeters all day and kind of isn't dilating, I get them on their side. I put that peanut ball between their upper thighs and I turn them every 20 to 30 minutes religiously. I have had more times than I can count take a mom from 2 to 3 to like 7 by her next check. It's insane. Doing that along with throne position where you sit the back of the bed up and they sit really high, and doing hands and knees if they don't have like a really thick epidural or if they have family that can help them. Just different positions can make a huge difference in how evenly that their cervix dilates. We also have the bundle birth position guide on our unit and I really like that. I'll bring it into the room and I'll show the moms, okay, you're at a -2, a -1, a 0 station, and based on that, these are the positions I would like to do with you. I think it makes such a difference, and even if they do have an epidural, you can usually get them into those positions pretty good. I always joke with my patients when I walk in with that big peanut ball, or small depending on their height, this is the thing that makes babies come out, because what they want to do usually is lay on their side with their epidural and take a nap, but that peanut ball is kind of big and it can kind of be like not uncomfortable, but not as good as just laying flat on your side. And I explain to them like, we can make this process a lot faster, we can get this over with faster and have a baby in your arms before we know it. I tell them I'm going to be back every 20 to 30 minutes to flip you the other way. Usually by the second or third flip, their water breaks on its own and then we're dilating and we have a baby. That peanut ball is one of my favorite tools to use, whether or not they have an epidural. Usually they don't tolerate it forever. I see it on the couch when I come in and they're like, I couldn't do it anymore. But as much as they can tolerate it, the better, because you're going to get the most use out of it. So that is all of my tips that I can think of right now that I wish someone would have taught me on orientation, or that someone did teach me on orientation that I really liked. And I want to make sure you guys know for your orientation or just to add to your practice as a labor and delivery nurse. Like I said, let me know in the comments if there's anything you learned or anything you do that you really like on your unit, because I love learning new things and I could always make an update video later. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. This channel is one of my favorite things about my life. I mean, like, I love my kid and my fiance, but you guys are close. You're up there. It's so fun. It's really just something to work towards every day. And I can't explain how much I love making videos for you guys. So keep liking, subscribing, commenting. It seriously makes my day every day. Thank you guys so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye guys.